Batman has probably the most interesting and unique villains out of any superhero, so I will be explaining an iceberg going from the mainstream villains you see in TV shows and movies into the depths of the comics with some more unknown and weird villains. I plan to make this a 4-part series as these videos will be quite lengthy, so if you want to see the future episodes you should subscribe, especially because I'm just a small YouTuber. Anyway, let's get started with tier 1, the Joker. Joker is probably the most important villain in pop culture and Batman's arch enemy. He has no clear backstory, which makes him even more interesting and mysterious. His most popular backstory is Alan Moore's The Killing Joke, where he originally worked as an engineer at a chemical plant but quit his job in order to pursue being a stand-up comedian. It didn't work out great as he was broke and needed funds to support his family. He decided to help out some criminals into his old chemical plant dressed up as the Red Hood. Before the heist, he learned that his wife and unborn child unfortunately died in a fire. Consumed by grief, he is forced to do the break-in, but as it was a setup, the police was alerted and a shootout occurred. Even Batman shows up and the terrified Joker falls over a rail into a chemical vat which bleaches his skin to white and hair to green. The pain of losing his family and seeing his own terrified reflection drove him insane, making him the Joker. The Penguin or Oswald Cobblepot was bullied a lot growing up for his short stature, obesity and bird-like nose. Even his own rich family looked down on him, which made him become evil. Only his mother loved him, while his father and siblings hated him. The kids would crack bird eggs while Oswald watched and tied him to monkey bars. The story behind the umbrella came from his protective mother forcing him to carry one after his father died from sickness after being drenched in a downpour. His treatment as an outcast grew more and more, and this fueled his hatred for society. After his father and brothers passed away, he inherited the wealth of the Cobblepots. He used the money to start Iceberg Lounge, which was a club where he conducted his illegal activities as a boxing promoter and a criminal. My personal favorite is the Riddler, known for his obsession with puzzles and riddles. He was originally known as Edward Nashton and was always a curious child seeking answers to everything that popped into his mind, which would often make adults very annoyed. He once entered a puzzle competition and won first prize, getting a book of riddles and puzzles, which then started his lifelong obsession. He was bullied a lot growing up until he eventually entered a life of mediocrity in the working class. As he hated his life, he turned into crime and entertainment. But as this also wasn't satisfying enough, he created a character for himself known as the Riddler, where he kept Batman and the police on their toes with his riddles and puzzles. Two-Face or Harvey Dent, who was a district attorney in Gotham City and a good ally to Batman. His story is a bit tragic. His father was an abusive alcoholic who used to give Harvey a chance to escape the abuse with a double-headed coin flip, which obviously never worked. The abuse caused Harvey to develop mental issues, but he decided to dedicate himself to a life of justice as a district attorney. This worked until a mobster threw acid at his face, resulting in half his face being scarred and causing him to go insane. Harvey blamed Batman for this event, which caused hatred against the Bat. After this, he adopted a criminal life where he became half Harvey Dent and half criminal Two-Face. He used his father's coin for every decision, both as Harvey Dent and as the criminal Two-Face. Scarecrow was originally a nerdy boy with a lanky frame. He was bullied and abused by his peers and parents. All this fear and revenge caused him to commit murder during his first prom as a ghoulish Scarecrow. He later becomes Dr. Jonathan Crane, who was an obsessive psychology professor at Gotham University. His goal was not money or power, instead he only wanted to study humans better. To show his teachings better, he fired a gun in the classroom, but this got him fired, which started his criminal journey, and in another story he injured a student. He then becomes a psychiatrist at Arkham Asylum, where he performs fear-induced tests on his patients. He took on the persona of Scarecrow to threaten and scare his victims into doing his bidding with his fear toxin during his time as a criminal. Poison Ivy is one of the few female villains in the Batman universe. Dr. Pamela Lillian Isley was an attractive and talented botanist who lived in Seattle. She helped a criminal, Mark Legrand, who needed her to assist him in stealing an Egyptian artifact with an ancient herb inside it. Mark poisoned Pamela with the herb to tie up loose ends, but she survived and became immune to all manner of toxins and diseases, She realized she was immune to certain plant-based hypnotic toxins. That way she could use it to control others and adopted the name Poison Ivy. She made Batman fall for her during their first encounter, and he needed to be bailed out by his willpower in the middle of the fight. In another story, she got powers by the Fluric Man's experiments and had her original powers, but also gained a plant-like appearance and abilities to grow plants. She could mutate people into plant hybrids and kill people with a simple kiss. Bane is an assassin who escaped a South American prison. He has great physical strength, which came from experiments with the venom drug. He was born to serve out his father's life sentence, which made him grow up inside a prison, and also where he murdered the first person at the age of 8. He became feared and respected within the prison and read any books he could get his hands on. Eventually he became the king of the prison, and the prison took note of this and nominated Bane to be a subject of an experiment that would create a super soldier using the venom drug. He is presumed dead from the experiment and is tossed into the sea, but survives and frees himself to return to the prison, where he held the warden hostage and escaped using a chopper, which he used to later travel to Gotham City in order to take down the Batman. Killer Croc is an alligator wrestler originally known as Waylon Jones. He was a monster in Gotham City, lurking around in the sewers. Jones was born with a condition where he had a thickly scaled hide instead of skin. He had super sharp teeth, causing him to get bullied a lot as he looked like a monster. He attacked a bully when he was only 8 years old and had to spend the next 8 years of his life at a reform school where he resented humanity more and more. As he grew, he became more and more reptilian and became a cold murderer, where he was captured and served a 20-year sentence. After he was released, he joined a traveling carnival where he was a popular attraction as an alligator wrestler known as Killer Croc. The carnival became his new family, where he finally felt at home and accepted, but unfortunately the circus failed for poor financial reasons. Jones moved to Gotham, where he started his criminal empire, eliminating mob members, and quickly rose to the top of the city's underworld. Mr. Freeze, or Victor Freeze, was an accomplished scientist, but after his wife Nora got sick with a disease, it all turned south. When Nora got sick, he began to spiral downwards and did everything in order to save her. He started working with the criminal Ferris Boyle to help her, but when she was beyond saving, he decided to freeze her into a cryostasis with the stolen equipment from Ferris' company. Ferris learns about this and sends his men to kill Victor, but this resulted in an accident which caused Victor's body to change so he can only survive in sub-zero temperatures. He builds himself a cryosuit powered by diamonds and arms himself with an ice gun to fully become the Mr. Freeze we know and see today. Harley Quinn, or Dr. Harleen Quinzel, who is often seen with Joker as his female sidekick or girlfriend, with a similar taste for humor and chaos. In the comics, her story revolved a lot around growing up with a harsh mother who abused Harley. Her father was a criminal conman who tricked women out of their money. Her brother was a deadbeat and wasted all the money Harley sent to try to help him. To understand her family, she studied psychology, and she grows a cynical outlook on life and meets the Joker, where they connect as they have similar philosophies. She finds a job in Arkham Asylum so she can speak with the Joker, and gradually becomes obsessed with the Joker and helps him escape several times. She later becomes his sidekick, madly in love, oblivious to the lack of affection for her, and allowed herself to be used by the Joker. Basil Karlo, the original Clayface, was a B-list actor where he previously starred in a horror movie. When he learned that he wasn't part of the remake, he was driven insane and went on a killing spree, killing crew members and the cast while wearing the mask of the movie Clayface. In another story, he's the actor Matt Hagen, who passed his prime and had a disfigured face in a terrible car accident. When he was recovering in the burn clinic, a corrupt businessman, Ronald Duggett, approached him and made him a test subject for his chemical compound, promising he would restore Hagen's youthfulness. For this, he needed to help Rogan by impersonating other people for his illegal operations. He agreed to receive the treatment and impersonated Bruce Wayne to steal some documents from Lucius Fox, but was later stopped by the Batman. He got tired of working for Ronald and tried to steal the compound for himself, but got stopped by his goons and got poured an entire canister of the chemical, which made him overdose and turn into a disfigured lump of clay who could shapeshift. This officially turned him into Clayface. Man-Bat, or Dr. Kirk Langstrom, a scientist specializing in the study of bats. He develops an extract intended to give humans the bat's sonar sense and tests the formula on himself as he was becoming deaf. While it works, it has some horrible side effects. It transforms him gradually into a hideous, humanoid, bat-like monster. He first clashes with Batman when he tries to steal the chemicals needed to reverse his transformation. Langstrom later refines his serum, enabling him to retain his human-like intelligence while in bat form, and allowing himself to control over his transformations. He works for a while as a detective and independent crime fighter as Man-Bat, while he and his fiancée Francine marry and have a daughter, Rebecca. Eventually, however, his instability returns and he is left unable to control his transformations. He believes he has slaughtered his own wife, son and daughter. However, both Kirk and Francine are shown to be alive. In a later story, Langstrom gives Talia Al Ghul the formula which he uses to turn members of the League of Assassins into Man-Bats. Catwoman, or Selina Kyle, isn't really a villain, but there's a lot of back and forth between her and Batman. In one story, she had a distant parent who preferred to spend their time with cats and commit suicide when Selina was very young. Her alcoholic father, Brian, is cold to Selina for resembling her mother, whom he resents for dying, and eventually drinks himself to death. To survive, Selina takes to the streets for a time before getting caught and sent to an orphanage, then a juvenile detention center. When she is 13 years old, Selina discovers that the detention center has been embezzling funds, and she confronts her. In an attempt to cover up her crime, they put Selina in a bag and drop her in a river to drown like a cat. She escapes and returns to the orphanage, where she steals the documents exposing the corruption. She uses these documents to blackmail them into erasing Selina Kyle from the city's records. Then she steals a diamond necklace and escapes from the orphanage. She is later taken in by Mama Fortuna, the elderly leader of a gang of young thieves, and is taught how to steal. Now on to the next tier, with Ra's al Ghul. Ra's al Ghul founded the League of Assassins. It's a league which wanted to create a new world by purging corruption and ready to kill anyone who stood in their way. Ra's was originally born 700 years ago in one of the Arabian deserts where he grew up with a tribe of nomads. He was very interested in science, but wasn't allowed to pursue his studies because of his tribe, so he left and relocated to a city where he became a physician. He marries a woman named Sora, the love of his life, and then finds the Lazarus. He tries to save a prince using the pit, but when he re-emerged, the prince was driven insane and strangled and killed Zora. The ruler of the city blames Raz for this and locks him in a cage with Zora's corpse. He gets freed by an elderly woman and then goes on to look for his birth tribe to help them avenge Zora. He convinces the head of the tribe to follow him into the quest for revenge and kills the prince and brings down the entire city and its citizens. For centuries he travels the world fighting in wars and prolonging his life with the Lazarus Pit until he finally creates the League of Assassins. Hugo Strange is one of Batman's most dangerous villains. He grew up in a state home as a bright kid, but he had a temper. He managed to put himself through college and medical school. He eventually became a professor of psychology at Gotham University until he eventually got fired for his wild theories on genetic manipulation. He begins his experiments in chemical and hypnotic behavioral modification in order to create henchmen for Gotham's criminals. After the appearance of Batman, he takes a special interest in the Bat and goes up against him, tries to sell his identity, frame him and torture him with imagery of his parents. His hatred of Batman turned more and more into a deranged obsession, using his medical expertise to hatch a series of bizarre plots based around genetics and mind control in order to defeat Batman and possibly take his place. Black Mask, or Roman Sionis, was born into a rich family as his father was a successful industrialist. His parents only cared about their image and often neglected their child because of this. he was dragged to parties and spent time with other wealthy children like Bruce Wayne, even though their family hated them. He hated his parents for making him wear this fake persona, and they would later die in a suspicious fire, causing him to inherit his father's company. He quickly drove the company to the ground, causing Wayne Industries to buy it, which caused his hatred for Bruce Wayne. All this drove him insane. He put on a mask carved from his father's coffin and began murdering Wayne employees. In a battle against Batman, Roman's mask became permanently burned into his face as a living death mask. He went on to become a ruthless and sadistic crime lord and commanded a masked army called the False Face Society. Killer Moth. The original Killer Moth was a prisoner identified only by his prison number. While in prison, he reads a newspaper article about Batman and decides to set himself up as the anti-Batman, hiring himself out to Gotham City criminals to help them elude capture by police. Upon his release, he uses hidden proceeds of his crimes to build a moth cave modeled on the photos of the Batcave in the newspaper article he read. Killer Moth also established a fake identity as a millionaire philanthropist, Cameron Van Clear. In this guise, he becomes friends with Bruce Wayne. Meanwhile, he promotes himself to Gotham's criminals using his identity as Killer Moth, giving them each an infrared moth signal. In his first job, he rescues some criminals from the police and then uses his Mothmobile to defeat and capture Batman and Robin. The duo escape and lead Killer Moth to a climactic battle on Gotham's bridge, in which he is defeated. Garfield Lynch was originally a pyrotechnic expert for motion pictures, but became a victim of Gotham's severe poverty and turned to crime, displaying signs of pyromania. Lynch took up arson as a hobby, but it soon turned to an obsession. He believes he can see visions in the flame. Inspired by actual fireflies, he built a suit and became a professional arsonist. Early in his criminal career, Firefly became the prodigy of Killer Moth, looking to duplicate the success of crime-fighting duo Batman and Robin. The alliance fell apart when Killer Moth realized the full extent of Firefly's madness and feared for his well-being. Once Bane broke the criminals out of Arkham Asylum, Firefly's plan was to burn down all the places he didn't go to as a child, but eventually gets captured by Batman after a few burned down buildings. Hush was born of wealth and privilege as Tommy Elliot. He becomes close friends with Bruce Wayne, and Bruce's father Thomas was happy to see the children bond and felt that Bruce finally had a friend he could relate to. They enjoyed playing strategy games, with Tommy always coming out on top. Tommy wasn't as lucky with his parents like Bruce was. He hated his father, who was a drunk and abusive towards his mother, who came from a background of poverty. She didn't help her son, as she was willing to endure the abuse dealt to them so she could keep her lavish lifestyle. He grew jealous of Bruce, and his hatred grew more and more until one day he killed his parents to claim his inheritance, but failed. Instead, he dedicated his entire life to destroying Batman, with his new secret identity being the bandaged psychopath Hush. He teamed up with the Riddler to put a plan in motion so Batman would finally kill the Joker and become a murderer. That didn't work, so he performed plastic surgery to look like Bruce Wayne so he could steal his entire life, his money, Selina Kyle, and injured poor Alfred. Hush continues to plot against Batman with his intellect and surgical skills. Arnold Wesker, or the Ventriloquist and Scarface, is an interesting one. He was shy ever since his childhood, and the deaths of his parents pushes him over the edge, and the emotionally fragile boy goes into the depths of grief. He suppressed all his negative emotions to cope with the loss until one day he beat a man to death during a bar fight and got sent to Black Cape prison. Slowly going insane, he believed his cellmate Donegan's carved ventriloquist doll Woody was alive, and together they managed to escape the prison after hanging Donegan from the same noose that was originally meant for Arnold. After his escape, he went to Gotham City as Arnold Wesker, and the now disfigured dummy Scarface became the supervillain. He quickly rises up through the criminal world and a powerful mob boss, so he could pull strings from the Ventriloquist Club. This lands him on the radar of Batman. Talia Al Ghul was the only child and daughter of Melisande and Ra's al Ghul. Her mother died a few weeks after birth and was raised by Raz himself, specifically groomed to become the heir to the League of Assassins. She grew up to become one of the League's strongest assets, a lethal martial artist assassin and a political maneuverer, as she could easily manipulate men to form her loyalty to her. She served her father's cause until she met and fell in love with Batman. He did fall for Talia, even though they always found themselves on the opposite sides of the battle. Talia even helped Bruce on many occasions during the crime spree by Hush and against Lex Luthor. In some stories they even have a child together. Carmine Falcone was the son of mobster Vincent Falcone. When Carmine was a young man, he was injured by a gunshot fired by rival mobster Big Lou. Due to having enemies across Gotham, Vincent took Carmine to Wayne Manor, where his life was saved by Dr. Thomas Wayne and Alfred Pennyworth. Because of this incident, Vincent considered himself to be in debt to Thomas. The Falcones managed to take control of Gotham City over the rivalry Maronis. After Vincent's death, Carmine became the family's new head, operating out of the front of an Italian shoe importer. Carmine came to become Gotham's most powerful Don, nicknamed the Roman for his cunning, strategic abilities and Italian heritage. Victor Zsasz is a unique villain compared to the others on this list. He isn't crazy, has no dysfunctional family background, no childhood abuse or trauma, but instead kills people because he likes it. He lived a life of privilege, had a loving, wealthy family and graduated top of his class. He went on to amass a fortune of his own through various companies. At the age of 25, his parents tragically died in a boating accident, which made Zsasz feel depressed at their loss. To cope with the loss, he went into gambling and ended up losing everything he had built. He realized how hollow life was and how robotic human beings have become. He decided to commit suicide, but before he could, he was attacked by a homeless person with a knife and saw the same hollowness in the attacker's eyes. That day, he decided he would take out the robotic humans from the world to make it a better place. He kills the homeless man and carves a mark on his flesh for each of his kills, which transforms him into the serial killer we know him as today. Professor Pig, or Laszlo Valentin's origin, is largely mysterious. He was a chemist who worked for the secret government agency known as Spiral. According to this origin, he was exposed to his own neurotoxin, which was designed to imitate Alzheimer's disease. This left Laszlo as a schizophrenic who has developed an obsession with making people perfect. With a lust for human perfection, he began to kidnap people from Gotham and made them undergo horrific transformations to create Dolotrons. It appears the operation he performs involves brain surgery and possible gender realignment. For his crimes, Pig allied himself with the Circus of the Strange. Pig was later persuaded to move to Gotham City by the evil Dr. Simon Hurt. Maxie Zeus is a former Greek history teacher who started to suffer from insanity when he lost his wife. He became a criminal mastermind and used his cunning and intelligence to rise to power within the chaos in Gotham City's underworld. He has fought Batman on several occasions before being committed to Arkham Asylum. Because Maxie seemed less dangerous than Joker, Two-Face and other notorious Arkham inmates, Arkham did not commit him to the maximum security wing, despite repeated recommendations from Batman to do so. Batman's concern was true when Maxie escaped to form a team of Greek-based superhuman agents called the New Olympians. He attempted to kidnap an Olympic athlete and force her to marry him and become a mother to his daughter Medea. This plot was foiled by Batman and the Outsiders, who bested the New Olympians in a series of Olympic-style games. Solomon Grundy was born as Cyrus Gold sometime around the early 19th century. In the year 1895, he had an affair with a local prostitute from Gotham City named Rachel. Rachel said she was pregnant with Gold's child and tried to extort money from him for silence. They met at Slaughter Swamp, several miles outside of Gotham. When Cyrus refused to go along with their blackmail, they killed him and threw him into the swamp, knowing no one would come looking for him. Over the span of 50 years, his body interacted with the ecosystem of the swamp, and his corpse transformed into a rotting undead state that would be Solomon Grundy. He didn't remember anything about his past except that he was born on a Monday and began to terrorize cities as a zombie-like creature. Rupert Thorne is introduced as a corrupt politician involved in organized crime, being blackmailed by Dr. Phosphorus into turning the city against Batman. After Phosphorus is defeated, Thorne persuades his fellow city councillors to declare Batman an outlaw. He He attempts to gain complete control of Gotham City by running for mayor but fails. Obsessed with finding out Batman's true identity, he goes after Hugo Strange to force him to tell him. Strange refuses and Thorne tries to kill him for it. He finally finds out Batman's identity and hires Deadshot to kill Wayne. Deadshot is unsuccessful though. He is eventually apprehended by Batman and brought to justice. Deadshot, or Floyd Lawton, is a mercenary and known for being a highly skilled assassin and marksman. He was born to rich parents and living in the shadow of his older brother Edward, who he looked up to a lot. He had an abusive father who his mother convinced to kill, so he climbed up a tree to get a perfect shot, but the tree branch broke and he shot his beloved brother in the head. That day he promised himself two things. He was gonna kill his father next chance he gets, and the second was that he was never gonna miss a shot again in his life. He trained as a sharpshooter and joined the Marines, and as an adult he spent some time with Russia's League of Assassins before becoming an independent hitman. He also had a daughter who was kidnapped by the agents of Cobra, and in order to get her back he worked with Batman, but after the missions Batman arrested him and sent to Belle Reve, a highly secure prison for powerful criminals. This is when he later gets invited to be a part of the Suicide Squad. Mad Hatter. Growing up, Jarvis Tetch, or the Mad Hatter, was a lonely, awkward child shunned by the other children and living in his own fantasy world. As an adult, he becomes a neuroscientist. His obsession with hats was because his father was a hatter himself. He was a short kid and had been spurned by a girl called Alice because of his short stature. Determined to win her back, he practically OD'd on steroids, which drove him insane, completing his transformation into the Mad Hatter. Tetch used his field of expertise and combined it with the obsession to create mind control technology powerful enough to subdue even the great Batman at one point. He almost succeeded in luring Barbara Gordon to a tea party, but Batman arrived in time to save her. As the years progressed, so did his lunacy, and he managed to become a mainstay in Batman's rogues gallery. That's it for the first two tiers. I'm sure you've heard or seen most of the villains on this list already on the mainstream media, like the Batman movies or the Gotham TV show. Maybe you didn't know their full backstory, so you might have learned something new. In the next part I'll be going over tier 3 and 4, so if you don't wanna miss that, you should subscribe, but see you until then.